Okay, so hi and welcome to the Worcestershire Homebrew Club's 7th birthday Zoom meet. Can't believe it's 7 years, but there we go. So yeah, and what's become a bit of a tradition now is that we have a little Zoom meet, and I guess one good thing that came out of COVID was that it opened up the world to Zoom meets. So it allowed us to do this and sort of test it out. But yeah, our birthday meet, we always invite some special guests, and we've got some very special guests joining us tonight. So firstly, I want us to welcome Jamil Zainasheff. Hi, Jamil. Thanks for joining.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
A few of us got to see Jamil's talk at BrewCon London towards the end of last year, and Craig probably went out and bought a massive pot of zinc that that's probably going to last him about 10 years, I reckon. So yeah, we're all now adding the tiniest amount of zinc solution to our brews, thanks to your talk, Jamil.
Great.
So, yeah.
Glad to hear it.
Yeah. Okay, so next up, let's welcome John Palmer. John, thanks for joining. Thanks for coming along. So you'll start to see a bit of a theme form here, John, but I had a little look online, and I believe it's been 7 years this year since How to Brew was first published. If the world of Google is correct, it was May 2017 when it was first published. So there you go, Chris.
Well, that's the fourth edition, actually. So
oh, is it? Yeah. Is there much changes, John, between the editions, or is it?
Oh yeah,
still a lot of work, is it? Yeah.
Yeah. That edition, the most recent edition, I added 200 pages to the previous.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, it's changed a lot over the years.
Yeah, excellent.
As I learn more, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Excellent. Well, thanks for joining us, John. And then next up, and I can't believe for the first time on a WHBC Zoom meet, can't believe we haven't had Andy on before, but welcome Andy Parker from Elusive Brewing.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it. Can I quickly ask John, when was it first published? Because I had that like
2001 was when the first hard copy came out.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I remember I bought it, I think like 2010, something like that. So.
Oh yeah.
So another 7-year element is that last year, Andy, you celebrated 7 years of Elusive. Have I got that right?
Yes, that was 20. Yeah, so we started in 2016. So yeah, May of 2024 will be 8. So yeah, I can't believe that. It's incredible to even think about that, to be honest.
And some big changes
still in business.
Yeah, and some big changes for Elusive this year as well. So is it next week the new tap room or the expanded tap rooms opening?
Yeah, so we took on another unit. So we now got 3 separate units where we are. The new one is a tap room with some storage during the week to keep planning permission happy.
Right, okay. Yeah.
And then we're basically where the old tap room was in unit 3 when Jamil came to see us last year. We're basically going to replace what was there with more tanks.
Right.
So we're going to expand tank capacity this year. Cellar capacity is going to go up about 60% this year, and then hopefully we'll be able to sell that beer, and things will be fine with the rent.
Nice, mate. Nice, excellent. Well, thanks for joining us. And then finally, it's always nice to have Reiki join the meets. He's been on a couple of the meets before, back in the COVID years. But yeah, thanks for joining tonight, Reiki. Appreciate taking the time out on your Saturday night.
No, thanks for organising it. Always a pleasure joining you guys.
Okay, so my final 7-year reference is that I believe that the malt miller has been operational for 14 years now, which of course is divisible by 7.
Yeah.
Excellent. So you can have a bit of a chat with us later, Reiki, about some fun things that you're going to be doing with the book that comes out a little bit later in the year.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. I can't wait.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, feel free, Reiki, to chip in with your comments. Your knowledge and experience is always welcome, mate. So yeah, feel free to chip in with the Q&As as well. Okay, so I think we'll kick it off then. So yeah, we've got a couple of Q&A sessions, and then we'll have a little chat about the book as well, midterm. So, Chris, take yourself off mute, mate, and you'll kick us off with the first question, then, if you will.
Thank you, Dan. So yeah, again, I have the honor of asking the first question. So again, thank you very much for taking your time out tonight to speak to us. I'm fairly sure I'm not the only one who's starstruck. I have the books from everyone, so it's a real privilege and honor. Thank you very much. So my question is, if you were to recommend to a competent brewer just one area of focus in the brewing process, what would it be? So things like water chemistry, yeast pitch rate, temperature control, osmolar control, things like that. Where would you ask the competent brewer to actually focus their attention first?
John, do you want to kick us off with that one?
Okay. Well, it's not water. And Jamil and I have talked about this a number of times, but fermentation is the name of the game. And I'll let the others chime in too, but I've taken more of an interest in maturation in the last few years. There's so much emphasis on vigor of fermentation and final gravity and attenuation and so on. And I think brewers kind of lose sight of the fact that there is the maturation phase that occurs after terminal gravity, diacetyl cleanup, acetaldehyde cleanup, carbonation, for that matter. I mean, and as well as haze dropping and clarification. So I think that is maybe not the most important thing a brewer should look at, but is certainly close second. And once someone's gotten familiar with the brewing process, they need to gain a better understanding of it.
Well, and I'd say that that's a part of fermentation as well, right? So yeah. that lag phase, I would say John's right. That's a key part of fermentation that people often ignore or don't think about. They're just like, well, yeah, it's done, crash it, throw it in a keg and start drinking it. And I think that comes with, they want the freshest hop flavor and things like that. But you got to be wary of those last moments of fermentation. I think a beer could be made or lost in that maturation period, like John's saying. But yeah, I'd agree. Fermentation, and your question says competent home brewer. So we're assuming that they're sanitizing things correctly. We're assuming that, they're doing the mash and everything. They're using fresh ingredients. They're doing full wort boil. They're controlling their temperatures, all that stuff. They're measuring things. So if they're doing that, it's always fermentation. And no matter, I'm still, focused on fermentation. Fermentation's key in making a beer. I'm sure Andy would probably agree with what we've been saying. Yeah.
I think so. Yeah. And the question was really well phrased, and it talks about competent home brewing. I think we've all made mistakes with hygiene, for sure. You get those out of the way pretty early on. I think when you start to create really good beer is when you nail fermentation control. I was always, when I started home brewing, used to brew for the seasons. I didn't have any temperature control in terms of like a pit and be able to control the temperature, but saisons in the summer, that kind of thing worked out pretty well. I think if you can nail the fermentation, keep the yeast happy, then you'll make a good beer. And I'm glad that John mentioned water. He wrote the book on water, but that's real. Just been working on our book currently, writing about water again. I kind of, if you get the basics right and nail your mash pH, the rest is fine tuning in many ways. A lot of homebrewers get obsessed with water, and you taste their beer and you think, well, this is the least of your worries, mate. Get the fermentation right. The water will very rarely throw off flavors, but a bad fermentation will kill your beer every single day of the week.
Cheers, Andy. Rakey, do you want to make any comments?
No, I mean, it's basically what the guys have said. If you think back to when you started homebrewing, the first thing that made the biggest impact for me was building a fermentation fridge. Once you start down that path, and when you visit breweries and you start learning more about what they're doing, conditioning times of like a week after it's finished and it's packaged, at least a week. You go to lager breweries, 90 days. It's just like the longer you leave it, the better. Yeah.
Yeah. I think we could probably talk about fermentation for the whole session, but what amazes me at the moment is yeast. I mean, even like, I started homebrewing about 8 years ago, and even now the range of yeast that is available for homebrewers is absolutely incredible. And it's a minefield, if I'm honest. Where do you start? Which yeast do you pick? It's quite fascinating. I mean, Rakey, you'll probably know this from the range that you got at the malt miller. It's literally where do you start as a home brewer in choosing yeast these days?
I know, yeah. I mean, when I started there like 6 years ago, there was like 50 white labs that we'd carry and like half a dozen dry yeast. Now it's just, we've got to be touching 400 different yeast to choose from at the moment.
Yeah.
It's just crazy.
Yeah, spoiled for choice. Any other comments, guys, about fermentation, or any other questions? It's usually a hot topic with us as well.
Well, I think my thinking was on the yeast, because I sort of definitely agree, and I wonder a little bit that we had this trend with Kveik yeast where you could turn around a beer in a week and everyone jumped on that, and I think it's led to potentially people thinking, well, you can turn around beer quickly and that's good enough. But I agree. I think the longer you leave it, the better it is.
Well, and if you're trying to make, the best beer possible, it is, selecting the correct yeast for the flavors that are produced. Yeast is going to produce, 80% of the flavors in the beer. So you need to select the right yeast and you need to treat it right. And then what I talked about at the Homebrew Con was, how amino acids can affect that, and the sequence in which the amino acids are utilized, it's going to affect the flavor as well. So it's it's critical, and I think more in detail you kind of fermentation pitching rates. Somebody kind of jokingly gave us a hard time about saying pitch more yeast. And, I thought about it and it's like, well, 20 years ago, when I started talking about, pitching more yeast, nobody was pitching enough yeast.
Yeah.
And today, I think a lot more people are pitching the correct amount of yeast. The yeast manufacturers have upped the amount of yeast in the packages. So, yeah, that's perhaps less of a problem. It's more about, viability, and it's more about, ensuring the proper nutrition, ensuring the proper, substrate for the yeast to ferment, and, controlling the conditions properly, including the end and maturation. All those things, can be key to great beer.
Yeah. And I think what Andy was saying too, as far as brewing seasonally, picking your yeast is a matter of understanding your brewing conditions. Picking the yeast that matches your conditions is a big factor, unless you can actively control all the conditions, like in a professional brewery.
Yeah. I guess
it doesn't have to cost a fortune either. There are ways to kind of make sure you're not ridiculously spending loads of money. Take a litre of your work from one brew, save it for your next brew, so you can use that for your starter. Crop your yeast off what you're brewing. It's like what I'm drinking at the moment. I cropped this out of a bottle of Papa Job for the St. Austell yeast. Oh, yeah. So I didn't spend a penny on yeast. All they had to do was build it up. Yeah. There's different ways to kind of also kind of keep it budget friendly. Because I know a lot of people will be happy to spend I know, £15 on hop for a brew, but they begrudge paying anything more than £3 for one packet of dry yeast, which is too little.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Dad
I do
has a
think
question.
homebrewers are pretty lucky with choice these days on yeast. I mean, it blows my mind. I think when I started, we had white yeast being imported, and then the dried fermentis and slalom and so on. But yeah, these days you're pretty spoiled for choice, and I think yeah, learn how to make your yeast happy, and that's really the secret to brewing good beer, I think.
Dad, patiently move his hand up.
Okay, so once we've got our perfect brew and we packaged it, and we want to mature it for 3 months, what temperature should we be keeping at? Obviously, it depends on what it is, but you know, if it's just like a normal ale, what temperature should we be keeping it at for it to mature properly?
Well, if you talk, you know, to Charlie Bamforth, he'll tell you, you know, -2, -1, right around there is, you know, kind of the sweet spot for, you know, long-term conditioning of a beer.
Are you
Improves
talking
retention,
Fahrenheit now, I believe?
No, C. So 29 Fahrenheit.
So you condition it at 0.
Well, condition
Yeah,
versus
-1.
maturation.
Well, so
Right.
yeah, no. So it's all packaged up. So let's put it. We fill the cask. What temperature should we keep that cask at?
Well, if it's
Or-
cask, then cellar temperature.
Yeah, you need to
Yeah,
have that
12 degrees.
secondary fermentation if you're bottle conditioning or cask conditioning. So we store our cask at 10 degrees after pack for a week before it leaves. I think if you're bottle conditioning, then around that point, because you want the yeast to do its thing as it re-ferments in pack. I think generally if you pack something that's is bright and is carbonated and ready to go, then keep it cold. For sure. I mean, keep it fresh, keep it cold.
Yeah,
Want it
keg
to-
beer.
You want it to develop in pack, then obviously, and you've packed with that in mind by adding more yeast and sugar, or how you've done it, then give it that temperature where the yeast can do its thing.
Yeah, keg beer you can long-term store cold, very cold, and it'll improve the beer. Anything with live yeast that you want to keep, you know, cellar temperature is better.
Yeah. So
Okay. Okay, I got loads of questions about that in my head, but I think we best move on. Like I say, I think we could probably talk all night about maturation and yeast, but let's move on. We got Dave Cutler, one of the OGs in What's the Homebrew Club. He's up with the next question.
Yeah, hi guys. Yeah, it's very nice to see you, nice to meet you. My question is really that you guys have got so much experience and been brewing for so long. What is it that keeps you coming back, or keeps it fresh for you? What keeps it exciting? Why the long-term view on brewing?
Jamil, do you want to kick that off? I guess at some stage in your life that was your job. That was your day job as well, wasn't it, Jamil?
Right. You know, I just enjoy the you know, kind of the art and the science at the same time, the craft of doing it. And then, you know, I enjoy the end product, but I enjoy also, you know, the people, you know, the ideas. And what keeps it fresh for me is, you know, I still haven't, I've brewed every style, or at least all the BJCP styles, to a high level of perfection. But there's still things where I think, even though that may be a first place or a best of show winning beer, I think that there's things that can still be improved. I think when we were brewing at Heretic, we'd have beers and they were great, but they were, in my opinion, not perfect, not absolutely, you know, the best that they could be. And every once in a while we'd hit that, and everybody tastes this. This is perfect. And so even there, where we were brewing, you know, repeatedly, it's difficult to get you know, the very finest, you know, to hit perfection is rare in anything, I think. Whether you know, whatever you do. So like, for instance, I just spent a bunch of time out in Dusseldorf talking to the brewers there and trying to learn absolutely as much as I can about replicating, you know, like the alt beers of Dusseldorf, or, you know, the Sticker alts and the Latzenbier and stuff like that. So I've gone to open ferment for those. You know, it's those little things that you know, just kind of thrill me and keep me going.
Nice, cheers, Jamil. John, do you want to?
For me, it's the process. I want the brewing process to make sense. So I want to know how all the pieces fit together, malting, mashing, you know, maturation, all of it. And yeah, for me, you know, from just thinking as an engineer, yeah, I want it to all, you know, fit into a nice, neat process and a nice, complete whole, as far as, you know, this happens here because it'll affect this down here, and that will make, you know, the beer turn out right. It's kind of funny. I mean, you know, it's interesting listening to Jamil because he as he says, he brews to perfection, and I love his beers. I've never been driven to perfect my beers like that. I'll brew. I think I've brewed a grand total of 3 beers from the same recipe from my career. You know, it's always this, that, the other thing. I just kind of have fun with the actual brewing, but it's understanding the brewing process that kind of keeps me excited.
How have you gone over the years then, John? Have you broken each section down and really sort of honed in on one particular part of the brewing to almost, I'm not going to say perfect, but almost like, you know, fully understand that section of the process, and then moving on and looking how that interacts with the next part of the process?
I would like to think so, yeah.
Yeah.
I would like to think I understand most of it, but, you know, we'll see what tomorrow brings.
Brilliant, thanks, John. So, Rake, it's more than just your job, isn't it, Rake? You've been home brewing for a while, and and you still really enjoy it.
Yeah, I was homebrewing before I joined the malt miller, and that's what got me pestering Rob for a job at the malt miller. You know, it's just, for me, it's like, I love the end products. I've always loved beer. I've always had a huge passion for beer. But then kind of getting into how it's made, each bits of the steps, you know, you can go as deep as you want, or you can be a bit lazy on bits and you can just go do the basics. But there's always something new to learn. You never stop learning in this. And like, then when you get the bit between your teeth and you think, I am going to brew the best lager possible, you just kind of deep dive into it for like months.
Yeah,
that's what I love.
Yeah, it's good. I think you can, as a home brewer, you can, like you say, Reiki, you can either sort of just have a brew day and enjoy the brew day, or you can really sort of hone in on part of the process and fully understand it. And I think for me as a home brewer anyway, over the years, I've kind of, I've probably started off a bit sort of lazy, but getting into understanding as much as I can of a part of the process keeps it interesting. So Andy, what gets you out of bed every morning then, mate, to open up the brewery?
I think there's I can cut across all 3 of the answers there. I think Jamil said, you know, looking to perfect things and fine tune. I think when I started brewing, I was brewing for the fun of it, and really it was an escape. And I used to do it every Sunday and just enjoyed it because it was a change up from what I was doing. And then I found an online community on Twitter actually, and basically became part of that community, and that kind of dragged me along and helped me improve. Then I joined a club in London, and then I found like-minded people that were as obsessed as I was with brewing. So for me, it's a bit of both. I think I love the camaraderie of it. I love things like this, which really came to the fore, as you mentioned, during lockdown. Chatting with homebrewers, chatting with like-minded brewers. I love the idea of taking a recipe and making it the very best you can do. We spent the last 4 years nailing our Oregon Trail, trying to get that to be the best it can be. And I've really enjoyed that as much as I enjoy brewing with Henry from Sunken Nave, a style I've never brewed before, like an old ale, something new and exciting for me that's probably 300 years old. Yeah, I love all of it. And I think as a hobby, it's quite unique in that the end product is beer. We like beer. Everyone likes drinking beer. Everyone likes talking about beer. And in terms of being able to turn it into my job, it was a no-brainer for me. And I think, it's quite a unique product in that it's got so much history, so much to learn. And anyone that ever says they've nailed all aspects of it is kidding themselves, because there's always something new to learn, always a new way to improve, and a new way to kind of learn and find your way forward in the hobby and professionally. So yeah, I think beer's pretty cool, and I'm pretty excited to have it as my career at this point.
Nice, excellent. Cheers, guys. It's always nice to get an insight into what you love about the hobby as well. It's great. It makes it a bit more personal. Okay, so we're going to move on, and Gareth, there he is. Yeah, crack on with your question next up, mate.
Okay. Yeah, obviously I've got books from everybody as well. I learnt loads from listening to Brew Strong, reading the book How to Brew, John, and when I first started getting into home brewing. So yeah, thanks guys. Okay, my question then. Jamil, you talked about cold crashing after fermentation has finished, and you talk about bringing the temperature down quite slowly, like I think it's a degree a day sort of thing you mentioned.
About 3C, 6 Fahrenheit a day.
Right, okay, so maybe I got that wrong, but just to stop the yeast giving off flavors from the two quickly cooling. So at the moment, I just would normally set my fridge to 0 or whatever when I'm done. I know the beer's done, and it might take a day or two to get to that temperature. Do you think that is about right, or should I be looking to step that out to a bit longer?
I think if you're trying to brew a perfect lager and you want to kind of control some of those flavors and get a cleaner overall flavor, a lot of times you taste some beers from some lager brewers and you get kind of a candy sweet or perfumey kind of character to them. I think a lot of times that can be from hard cold crashing these lagers. Not 100% certain, but I think that's kind of come up. But in ales, it's not as big a deal. But in any case, for the yeast, the stress of cooling them down rapidly can cause them to go into kind of a security mode. So not necessarily the best for them, but I will say if you're growing yeast, the yeast manufacturers, they get to a certain point in fermentation and they cold crash to get the yeast to fill their glycogen reserve. So it does help the yeast for future pitches. But once you've gone through fermentation and the maturation period that John was talking about at the end of fermentation, and then you're ready to cold crash it at that point, it doesn't really help. So the yeast much, but yeah, for ales, fine. Lagers, I'd do the slow chill on the lagers. I mean, it's just a matter of setting your controller. What we did at Heretic was 3 degrees Fahrenheit down in the morning when people got there, and 12 hours later when people are leaving at the end of the day, 3 degrees down again Fahrenheit, and 1.5 C, and we just do that on a regular basis until it hit the temperature we wanted. So it's not that much work. It does take a few extra days, but you know, but if you're trying to really make that flossing, if you're obsessed like me, you have the beer OCD, then yeah, cold, slow cold.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
And
I definitely agree with that.
Oh, sorry, go on, Rake. Yeah.
I definitely agree with that, especially having like been to a number of lager breweries. None of them rush it. You know, they're not in a rush to get it down there. Basically it's a living organism. If you put it through stress, it's going to freak out and it's going to make your beer taste slightly off. So just take your time. There's no rush to get there.
Yeah. Andy, is it something that you do at Elusive as well when you?
Yeah, we
finishing the beer?
for us it depends on the yeast strain we're working with. So we work a lot with Chico in the form of LAX from WHC Labs, and we find actually it can throw a bit of sulfur during chill, and weirdly, like it's finished, you've hit target, you've hit your force firm gravity, and you start chilling it, it can throw a bit of sulfur, and if you chill it too quickly, that can stay in, and it's not like not like farts, it's like struck matches, that kind of sulfur, and we bubble it out. But I think if you chill it slower, we found we don't get that. Whereas yeasts such as Nottingham or SO4, some of the more robust English yeasts, we've found they don't really care. Like if they finished, your diac's gone, you chill it, you crash it, and you can do what you want with it. So I think we find it varies from yeast to yeast, but generally we try and avoid crashing too quickly. We normally do it over 3 or 4 days, and also we do that because we use an auxiliary fining Brauselp, which is a German product, which we add at 10 degrees. And if you add it above 10, it doesn't perform as well. So we'll bring slowly down to 10C, then we'll pitch that product, then we'll generally crash from there.
Okay, cool. John, anything you wanted to add?
Cool. Yeah, this question has been on my mind a lot this past year. You know, what is the actual effect of cold crashing? And I had been judging at Great American Beer Festival and some of the other comps, and I was seeing beers with very poor head retention, lagers and so on, but very, very poor head retention. And so I wondered, you know, hey, is commercial cold crashing practice resulting in lipid release, which is destabilizing foam in the beer? And so a couple months ago, I emailed a couple of friends of Brewlosophy and posed the question to them. So they did an experiment last month, and I was talking to Martin about it just a couple of weeks ago. And bottom line in their, you know, experiment, you know, an IPA side by side, they could not tell a significant taste difference between the two beers. One cooled slowly, you know, in the 3 degrees per day kind of regimen, versus a crash cool, just turning the controller down and letting it rip, you know, overnight basically. But they did notice a small difference in head retention. Now, and this will probably be posted in the next week or 2 or 3.
It's up already.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a small difference in head retention, but you know, it's one data point. But I thought it was interesting.
I think the problem with that is if you're going to do this with an IPA, you know, the high hopping levels are going to affect head retention more than, you know, the crash cooling. So
yeah,
I don't think it was really the best recipe to use for this test. So you might see more of it, like you noticed at GABF. You might see more of that in a lager.
Yeah, I was going to say maybe a lager would be a good experiment as well.
Yeah, there's a lager brewery in Denver called Bierstadt, and they cool very slow. They're like 1 degree a day kind of thing. So yeah, there's, you know, multiple practices across. Another factor that came to light I was talking with a couple other breweries. one beer that has notoriously bad head retention. It turns out they high gravity brew it. So, it's like double its OG when they ferment it, or when they boil it and ferment it, and then they dilute it down. And so that dilution of head protein is probably a more significant factor for head retention in that beer than, how it was cooled.
Yeah, interesting. Ben, I think you was going to come in with a comment.
Yeah, I was just wondering whether the scale of home brewing versus commercial brewing maybe makes this more have more of an effect on the home brewer, because you're crashing such a small volume. If you set the domestic fridge to 3 degrees and let it crash, it's going to crash really quick because you've just got that small volume there. So yeah, maybe it's something as home brewers we need to pay more attention to, and like you say, for all the reasons you've mentioned, cool a bit slower.
Yeah, I think I fall back on the fundamentals, where any change you make to the fermentation process of a beer is going to result in a different beer. Maybe not a significantly different beer, but different. So, brew how you want to brew, and and accept those results. I think I at least from the Brewlosophy experiment, I think that based on that one data point for that IPA, maybe it's cooling rate is not a big factor for flavor change or head retention or whatever, but I still do think it is a factor.
Yeah,
it depends on the beer. Like I said, lagers,
and
IPA
yeast strain
probably not.
has to play a role too.
But one thing, Ben, to your question about crashing too quickly, but when I was homebrewing and had a fridge that could crash very quickly, I noticed the first few times I dry hopped, I was like emptying the FE afterwards, and there were whole pellets in there. So make sure we give enough time to get those hops in suspension and don't drop them out too quickly. So yeah, give them time to unpelletize and then crash them. Something to bear in mind for dry hopping.
Nice. Cheers, guys. Okay, so one of our members, Lloyd, sent in a few questions, but unfortunately he couldn't make it tonight because he's down in Cornwall visiting Verdant. So so they've come before us, unfortunately, tonight. But he sent in some good questions, and Ben Lester has volunteered to ask a couple of Lloyd's questions that he sent in. So go for it, Ben.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, pretty valid excuse for not being here, I think, that visit to Verdant. So thanks again, guys, for joining us. Really good to have you on. So yeah, Lloyd's question was around yeast, particularly around dry yeast. I think a few of us have kind of flip-flopped between dry yeast and liquid yeast over the years. Lloyd was wondering, with dry yeast being so much better than it was years ago, and being obviously more inexpensive than liquid yeast, is there any styles in particular where you'd still resort to or go for liquid yeast over dry yeast? Is there any size where you think that's important, or vice versa, I suppose, where you'd prefer to use dry yeast over liquid?
I guess we best get to Jamil for that first.
I think there's essentially every style still. It just depends on what you want to do. So there's just far more liquid yeast strains available, and there's even plates and stabs that you can get and grow up your own yeast from those. So there's a vast repository of yeasts that you can use. So dry yeast has really come a long way since just in the last decade, and there's far more styles or strains of yeast that you can use, so you can do more styles. I think it's just if you're trying to make one thing and you just can't find the right flavor, the right yeast, the right yeast dry, then you're going to have to turn to liquid. But if you a lot of times people will brew with the same yeast, and they'll brew every style with one yeast, and it's just ends up different colors of the same beer a lot of times, so I encourage people to try different yeasts. Try different dry yeast. Don't just use the same one every time. Buy those other ones that they're coming out with, because if no one's buying them, they're going to stop making all these other dry yeasts. If everyone's just buying the USO5 and ignoring the 20 other ones that they came out with, they'll get rid of those and they'll stop making new ones. So try the different dry yeast and try wet yeast. But the reason would be to get a specific flavor profile that you want in a beer. You want to match something you had when you were traveling and you went to Verdant or whatever, right? You want to get that same yeast.
Yeah. Reiki, your kind of time at the malt miller, have you seen trends change between liquid yeast and dry yeast?
Dry yeast has its place, liquid yeast has its place. I've got favorite dry yeast I love, absolutely love, and I'm that kind of go-to for like certain styles of beer. But like Jamil says, it's like you really want to fine-tune a beer, explore, experiment. If I want to do Timothy Taylor's Landlord, I'm going to use Y yeast, West Yorkshire. It adds that flavour. You're never going to be able to kind of do that beer style, that exact beer, without that yeast. If I want to do a lager, love Einstein from WHC, but if I want it to be a Czech lager, I go and buy the Budvar strain from White Labs. All those little tweaks, those elevations, those are kind of when you've been brewing for quite a while, it's worth spending those few extra pounds kind of and honing it in.
I was laughing as Jamil said about if you brew different styles with the same yeast. That sums up a lot of English family brewers where they try and brew something different and it's the same. I remember
a Pilsner with their ale yeast. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, your yeast is such a defining character in the beer that, and some of the yeasts are so characteristic and almost define the beer in itself. You brew a different style, it tastes exactly the same. It's pretty funny. I think from my point of view, I think I started out brewing with wet yeast, and I was lucky in my local homebrew shop had Y yeast. Then I found the malt miller. But I think we commercially we brew with dried yeast because we weren't brewing often enough to have a yeast program where we could crop it and wash it and keep it clean, keep it going. But I think homebrewers these days, homebrewers have always been spoiled for choice. And I think homebrewers these days are especially spoiled for choice because you've got all even the bootleg yeast, all the stuff from all around the world. Like, go play with it, as Jamil says. Like, if you don't keep playing with it, then people will stop making them. I think it's great to see a lot more wet yeast, and it's good to see the development in dried yeast as well, because dried yeast got everything you need in there. You pitch it, you kind of fire and forget in many ways. Get your basics right, temperature control, pitching rates, and generally you'll get a good fermentation. But keep playing, keep experimenting. That's your privilege as homebrewers. Keep experimenting.
John, anything you want to add?
Not really. It's it's kind of amusing. I was thinking back to the very early days where we had a choice of 2 yeasts to now where we got dozens. I brew so infrequently. I'm almost always using dry. I will order liquid yeast and then it'll die in my fridge, unfortunately. So I agree with what both Jamil and Reiki and Andy said. You want to really.
Do you still have a play about with different dried yeast, John, or do you stick to the same dried yeast, or do you tend to stick to the same dried yeast?
I tend to stick to 3470, and I've been using SO5 a lot, but I really don't like it. To me it throws sulfur that I don't want in the beers that I'm brewing with it. There's a new, another variant of the Chico Ale Cali yeast. There's what is it? The BR97 is also a Chico variant. I'm going to start using those. I like the dry kveik yeasts. I've had some very nice beers with those. Yeah, if I would love to use some of the West Yorkshire and brew a really nice English bitter with it, or something along those lines. But yeah, every time I try to do that, it ends up dying in my fridge.
Okay. Cheers, John. Thanks for that. And so to finish off this first Q&A session, then I'm gonna ask a question, just make sure I've got the right question. Yeah. So yeah, my question is around mash lem. Traditionally, I guess 60 minutes is what we all know and do. Some of the sort of older homebrew books were 90 minutes in mash lengths. But I was just wondering if with what we know now about mash and what we know and the knowledge that we've got, and even with the more modern malts and processes, the malting processes, do you still feel that 60 minutes, 90 minutes, or 90 minutes is correct? Are there any styles that we could potentially reduce that mashing cycle time? Just want to gather your thoughts on that, really. Andy, what do you want to kick us off? What's your thoughts on
I
it?
think you can always. The first I ever heard of a short mash was when I was working with Weirdbeard, and Brian had been somewhere and had picked up the idea of a 15-minute mash, where you do an iodine test after 15 minutes, and you see how much of conversion you've got, and you can move on. I think we've always stuck with 60. Most of what we're brewing is in that kind of the ballpark is between 1045 and 1060 as an OG in terms of the where we're aiming for. We've always gone for 60, and if we measure conversion after 30, 45, generally it's finished, but we leave it. The only time I would go longer, in fact, this week we brewed 3 double IPAs because January, and we basically found that if you let it run to 75, recircuit a bit, you generally extract a little bit more, and that those extra 15-20 minutes will help. But I think there's probably one part of the process. There was a later question I saw about boil time, which I guess we'll come on to, but mash time, generally you could cut it under, but make sure you do that test, make sure you're fully converted and you've got the extraction you need before you move on to the next part of the process.
Cool.
Interested to hear other thoughts on that one.
Yeah, Jamil, what's your thoughts on that question?
Yeah, I'd say pretty much the exact same thing Andy said. You can get a little bit more extract out of it because not everything is perfectly wet at the very beginning. Not everything is fully converted at the very beginning, and it happens over time. So if you're trying to maximize your extract, like a commercial brewer might be, and you have the time, you tend to go a little longer. At Heretic, we would dough in, and as soon as the mash was mixed up and at the proper temperature, we would start pumping it over to the louder tone because it would take at least 20 minutes to get over to there. So it was 20 minutes in the mixer, 20 minutes pumping over. And then 30 to 35 barrel brew house, and in the louder, then we'd start to recirc and pretty much immediately because it took a while for it to get clear. But by the time we started running off, it had already been an hour and a half, and by the time we finished sparging, it was 2 hours. So that tends to happen in commercial, even though people would say, oh yeah, we mash for 20 minutes. Well, it's 2 hours really. And the same thing happens in the home brewery, where you may have a mash rest of 20 minutes, 30 minutes, but how long do you start vorloffing, your mash, and how long do you do that? Do you do that for another 20, 30 minutes and then, your sparge? So you're really probably doing an hour, even if you just do 30 minutes. But unless you're trying to get more extract, you can go pretty quick.
Yeah. John, is there any issues we may come across if we mash shorter?
Well, I guess what I want to say is that it depends on what you're mashing. Long mashes, 90 minutes, let's say. 100 years ago, 200 years ago, barley had less enzymes. It was less malted. It was less modified. The mash took longer. With developments in higher enzyme content of barley, making it more maltable so it malts faster. I mean, to these days, it takes about 3.5 days to complete the malting process. 100 years ago, it took 5 days. So, the mash, it can be shorter. But I think before it's not one size fits all. Before you jump down that rabbit hole, make sure that what you're brewing, what you're mashing has been adapted for a short mash. And then, you could probably, have it, 97, 98% complete in 30 minutes. You would have a minimum of retained starch. If you let that go longer, you get the retained starch out. You could do a mash out, make sure that retained starch is converted. There's a whole bunch of things that happen in the mash, not just sugar generation. So there's lots of reasons why to dictate the length of your mash.
Cool. Rake, you done any experimenting with short mash times?
No, because I think what's the rush? If you're going to be brewing with grain, you're brewing with grain. You want to rush it, just go and buy some extract.
Yeah, good.
I've done like an 8-hour kind of brew day with like a 2.5-hour mash for a double decoction. It adds to the flavor, it adds to the experience, it adds to your day. Enjoy it. Don't rush it.
The last beer I did was alt beer, and I did double decoction as well. And I'm hanging out with a friend. It's fun, and it strikes me as funny that a lot of brewers, they'll talk about, I want to shorten the mash up and do this quicker, and then they're also curious about how do I do decoction mashing, and it's like, well. What is it you're trying to achieve? I think homebrewers are really just trying to play with all the controls of the brewing process. Like John was saying, just try different things in different parts of the process and see what happens. That's one of the joys of homebrewing, is you can do all that sort of thing, and you can do it as much as you want, and it's a blast.
Just have a play about.
We're really spoiled with like highly modified malts, but when you actually get your hands on the slightly less modified, the under modified, and actually do these longer brew days, it's another great experiment. It's a great experience. Don't miss it. Give it a go. What you do is you get the smoker on and you put a pork shoulder on there for like hours, or a nice pork belly. Enjoy the day.
Yeah, you could microwave a pork shoulder too, but put it on the smoker,
that is
right?
it. Yeah.
Love it. Okay, cheers, guys. Some good questions there, but we're gonna have a little break from the questions, and now, and we're gonna have a little chat about this new homebrew book we've been hearing about over the last few months. So we thought we'd sort of dive into that a little bit. Andy's writing with the help of Jamil. So it's been a couple of years since your first camera book's come out, hasn't it, Andy? What prompted a second book then? So
it's been 5 years actually, which is mad to think about. Yeah, so that came out 5 years ago. and I did a little bit of work for Camera after that around anglicizing a couple of American books they brought over, and yeah, they published a few books after that. But what they want with this book, and they approached me about a year ago to discuss it, was so basically, if you think about their Camera's homebrew offering, it goes back to Graham Wheeler's book, and and not too much beyond that. And they want to like create a bang up to date homebrew title, like a flagship homebrew title, to supersede what the great work that Graham did with that book that was, it's almost 30 years old. Can you believe it?
Yeah. Wow.
And create something that's all about modern homebrewing, like modern homebrewing methods, modern ingredients, modern and modern in Camera's terms means, you know, it means lots of things, but like bring us up to date with a new book that basically talks about all the styles that homebrewers are making, what excites homebrewers in terms of styles, ingredients, methods, techniques, equipment. And yeah, I got commissioned to write the book about 6-7 months ago. And I met Jamil at GBBF, I think before lockdown, so it must have been 2019, I think, Jamil. I mean, to write that book by myself would be a massive undertaking. So I messaged Jamil, knowing about his love of English beer and everything in England. Jamil was a sucker for a cask mild and a cask bitter. So like, would you fancy getting involved and helping me with this book? And to my surprise, he replied and said yes. And here we are. So we started on the book. When did we start it, Jamil? Like 6 months ago, and now we're getting near our deadline.
Yeah, not long enough ago. How about that?
And so it's being published in September of this year.
Okay.
So we're writing at the moment, and our deadline is end of May for final copy. But we've got our own deadline of end of February to get everything, most of it 90% done, and then we'll start on the recipes and the rest of it.
So is it your typical homebrew book, or is it something a little bit different? Typically, we see, you know, some information about brewing and the brewing processes, etc., and then we see some recipes. Does it follow a similar sort of format, or have you mixed it up a little bit this time?
We had a chat about this, Jamil and I, when we started, saying there's no point writing just another homebrew book. We wanted something that offers something a bit different. So yeah, I mean, we'll get onto that, I guess. But hopefully it's a little bit different to what's out there currently. One aspect we've got, and why I was keen for Reiki to join, is that we're going to hot link out to video. So there'll be QR codes as you go through where you can scan and watch a video. And that will cover not just process, but also, some more fun stuff as well. So it's hopefully a book that's a little bit different to what's out there on the market at the moment. Yes, there'll be recipes. Yes, there's a little bit about the process, but also lots of stuff that I've not read in homebrew books before. So yeah, hopefully you guys would enjoy it. I'm sure, Jamil, you got things to add, and Reiki too.
Yeah, I'm enjoying the process of working with you on the book. You know, we have our weekly meetings where we go, all right, we both need to work harder and faster. And we're kind of covering off a lot of detail about various things about the process that I think aren't covered. You know, the standard book kind of goes through the progression of, well, here's how you brew. We're talking about, okay, so you've read that and you know that part. How do you take that to the next step? What is it that you may be missing, that you're not doing in the most modern a way, or you're not utilizing the best of the new technologies that are available to you? And then also kind of some of the new styles that or types of beer, you know, the extremely hoppy beers, the great lagers, the ultra high gravity beers, the
lots,
low
lots
gravity
of
beers,
adjuncts and processing adjuncts through the tank, that sort of thing.
Okay.
gluten free, and how do you make
Low
a
alcohol.
perfect, how do you make a perfect beer along those lines? What is it that makes, that the great brewers are doing to make a beer, an excellent beer in this kind of category? Here's the tips and tricks for those sorts of things. Here's how the modern brewers are doing these things.
Nice.
So yeah, we're trying to do something advanced in a way, but not just like ultra high level, but a lot of the bits and pieces that are missing from most of these books about brewing.
Okay. And is it? I'm always quite fascinated how a book is kind of researched and written and that kind of thing. Is it just you guys bringing in your experience, or does CAMRA have a bunch of researchers that you can call on that can go out and get information, etc.? Or
I think, well, it's just us guys, but they have a lot of resources. I mean, for one thing, they're going to edit and do all the design work and stuff. They're good at publishing. In terms of the copy itself, it's down to me and Jamil, and we brought the guys from the Malt Miller in as well to help with that. But yeah, I mean, between us, we've got a good amount of contacts, and we mentioned recipes. There'll be some really good fun recipes in there because Jamil knows everybody, and we're basically going to bring some good stuff in that you guys will, the more advanced brewers will want to brew, but also trying to bring across what we've learned from commercial brewing as well. Not advanced stuff, but kind of stuff that we've learned that you should be doing as a home brewer if you want to make the best beer you can.
nice.
But I'm pretty excited about the video content as well. So
Yeah, I was going to say, Reiki, is that Jim doing his thing? He's doing a pretty good job on the Malt Miller channel, etc. Or
Look, mate, I'm just stoked that we're getting involved again. It's like the day that we were invited to be part of this was one of the best days ever at Malt Miller for me. No offense to John, his book was the first one I bought, and my favourite book is obviously Brewing Classic Styles. But this, in terms of introducing new people to the hobby, the passion, what we all love, is a great book. For them to be contacted and says, "Do you want to be involved in number 2? How do we do it slightly differently?" Because it's like, this was kind of like the example of like last minute. It's like Andy says, "Oh, I need a picture of something. Can you send it to me?" And this is me taking it with a phone, right? But now we've got, like you just touched on, we've got James. Jim. I mean, some of you hopefully have watched some of our video content. Our video content has been taken beyond where it was. James used to come in and do like 1 day a week for us. We'd like badgering him to come and do videos. He's now there in the office badgering us, like, we've got to film this day, we're filming this day. Bill's just like, oh God, James, just give us a break. But no, he's absolutely brilliant in terms of what he puts out and how good he makes us idiots look on YouTube. So to then combine that skill and that ability into the book, I absolutely can't wait for this thing to hit the market and see how guys respond to it.
so is that still being worked on now, Reiki? Is Jim still working on the videos, or is it done?
Not to give things away, James is working and talking with Andy in terms of content, what's going where, how many videos we can get in, how many we can fit in between text being finished to book being published. But yeah, Jim's on it. It's also taken him away from badgering me to film on this day, thankfully. So yeah, he's absolutely in his element. He's loving it, and it's going to be absolutely fantastic. I really have high hopes for this.
Nice. And just coming back to the recipes, Andy, in your first book, it was probably the first home brewing book that we saw in the UK where some big name craft breweries had given recipes for the book, and some pretty impressive recipes in there as well. This book, is it the same sort of thing, or are you bringing some of your own recipes in, or is it style specific, etc.?
So the whole book is basically style specific. That's the way we set out to write the book. But it's going to be a mix of both. So, I mean, yeah, I've got a little spreadsheet going about the recipes that are included. So I started writing about like adjunct beers. So I contacted Stephen at Vault City. So
Yeah.
we've got their strawberry star, whatever they called it, recipe, things like that. So, and Jamil reached out to Trillium. We've got a Trillium recipe coming in. This week I spoke to Sam Tierney at Firestone Walker. We're going to have one of their beers, whichever one I want to choose, which is amazing.
Yeah.
So there'll be some really good, fun commercial recipes going into it, but it's still very much style led.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Nice. Okay. Cool. So yeah, I was just going to open it up to any of the guys. You got any other questions or any queries about the book? This is where they all go quiet.
Can't wait for the book. Yeah, exactly. We can't wait. I mean, it's September. It's yeah. No, I think the world needs a book that's the next level, because I think, you know, we've all got the books from yesteryear, and we've all got, you know, some of us have got like sort of like grandfathers and stuff like that. So I think the way of brewing is probably very different to where previously some of the books were sort of pitched. And I think reflecting the modern way that we have, I mean, you'll know it yourself. Some of the home brewers have spent thousands of pounds developing really quite nice systems, and I think it's, you know, what can we do with that? And there's obviously new styles out there that people are brewing, and you know, we want to get the best we can from what we've got. So I'm looking forward to it.
Spot on.
And from my side, as to whether there's going to be any water treatment hints also included with the recipes, because that's something that I find is often missing on these recipe books. Gives you everything, and then you think water side, where should I be aiming the water for this brew? And that's the bit that's kind of missing.
So yeah, I just last week wrote the the section on water in the book, and I think we touched on it earlier. Like John wrote the book on water, like the to I think a lot of it's fine tuning, but yeah, we'll give a steer with each recipe where to pitch your water, and yeah, I think hopefully the content on water in the book in general will be helpful as well, which is all about basically getting the basics right, because the basics, as you guys know, you're good brewers, you've all won awards, I think. Yeah, get the basics right, and the rest of it is fine tuning. Yeah, I'll try and give a steer. It's a good point with each recipe, what each brewer did with the water. But I think you'll find that for the most part they're not doing a great deal with the water. Don't get too high on
Yeah,
Yeah.
I sympathize with that, Andy, because I recently wrote a short book last year called "How to Brew in Your Kitchen," which Brewers Publications didn't want. So I sold it to a Spanish publisher, and it's going to be published in Spanish in Mexico, South America. But I had a terrible time trimming my water chapters down to an introductory book.
Could imagine.
It's such a deep topic, and I mean, Graham Wheeler wrote the original Camera homebrewing book, and he was very brutal about water. Basically, suck it and see. You know, get the chlorine out, and the rest is like, you know, Salt Bay with the seasoning. Like basically,
Yeah.
like, you know, suck it, try a bit of salt. If you don't like it, don't do that. Do something else. More kind of like sensory led. Yeah, I do. Having spent a few years at London Amateur Brewers, everyone gets hung up on water. And that's normally the least of your worries. Like, get your mash pH right and forget the rest. Like, it's fine tuning.
It did get 8 pages.
In the next book, I think it's going to be, well, we got 3 or 4, Jamil, on water. I think about 1,000 words. So
yeah,
we'll see. Trying to play that down a bit, get the basics right, and
yeah.
I think that's
Dan's question coming up on water, whether you use RO and minimum, I think is, as we get into that, I think the key points are chlorine removal, and then, you know, each step beyond that is simply the low hanging fruit first.
Yeah. Okay. So so we'll kick off a few more questions, but yeah, really looking forward to seeing the book and coming out, and Reiki, really looking forward to seeing the video content as well. I'm sure it'll be great. I'm really enjoying the videos that you guys are putting out on a weekly basis now as well. It's pretty impressive.
That's down to militant Jim pushing us to do stuff all the time, trying to get things like in the bank, things that take a little bit longer. But yeah, we're really happy with it, and we just love contributing to the community with those videos.
Yeah, spot on. Great stuff. Okay, so we got a little bit of time. We are running a little bit over, but we've got a little bit of time for a few more questions. So we're gonna go back to Chris. Chris, you got a second question then?
I have, and first of all, thank you, Andy, for the discount code. So I've taken advantage of the Overboard and Old Ale, and it sort of links to the question really. So I would say the homebrewers are really good at jumping on new styles or trends of the day. So I think if you look back a few years ago, we had IPAs, Brut, Black, New England IPAs, and then I'd say more recently, like sort of the West Coast. Then Pils and Helles and sort of lagers became quite popular, I would say, amongst the homebrew community. And then we're seeing things like fruity sours, etc. Now, looking at 2024, do you see a new or different style being popular with homebrewers in this year, or do you think that people will just sort of hone their experience with existing styles, but perhaps are switching out a little bit the hop, grain, yeast combinations?
I'll go with that one first. I think commercially, it's a weird thing, and I'm interested to hear others' thoughts on this. But in a way, homebrewers lead commercial brewers, and then it happens in reverse sometimes. I think commercially this year we'll see more of a return to traditional styles. I think Cask has got really good traction again in the UK, which is great to see. The Old Ale we brewed with Henry Overboard has been the best received bid we've done for the past year for sure, and that's great because that's our heritage as brewers. So I think from my point of view, we'll see a return to more traditional styles, and I'm really pleased about that.
Yeah, it's interesting. Quite a few of the big craft breweries now are putting out, cask ales and as well as it seems to have gone a little bit of pace over there. Certainly over the last 12 months from what I've seen anyway. John, how about you? I'm not sure.
I don't pay attention to that sort of thing, honestly.
Yeah.
I find I'm kind of surprised I'm so out of touch with what new styles homebrewers are making. I guess I'm more interested in the brewing process and new brewing techniques and new malts and so on, rather than the style of the day, whether it's a bubblegum IPA or whatever. I don't know.
No worries. Reiki, have you seen any trends coming towards 2024? You sell quite a few of the kits now, don't you? They're sort of like the ingredient kits. So is there any ones which are sort of like standing out in terms of newer styles?
Our recipe kits are quite interesting in the fact that what we put together as a recipe kit, if you kind of knew what were the most popular, it's pretty consistent.
Is it?
Like we do a neck oil clone, but it is actually the original neck oil before they got sold, because we got the recipe from Logan for projects we were doing with him, and it never went any further. So that's one of the most popular ones we do, because people like the fact that it tastes like the original. Landlord, Belgian Blonde, still hugely popular. But for us, it's like I kind of look at it in the sense of like we still have people who are very much seasonal. You'll see the dark beers kick in around about September. You'll see people brewing a lot of lager over this time of year. Seasonal brewing's always been very popular within homebrew. In terms of what then we sell in terms of beer styles, I tried introducing load of great kind of cracking hazy juice bombs. No, people want traditional styles. Homebrewers want traditional styles.
Yeah.
You know, master a ESB, master a best bitter. Seriously, we sell, you know, good chemistry, hand over fist. People love it, you know, because you've got those great classic styles there, those malt focused beers. People want to drink beer that's an everyday beer, not a 8% dipper. You know, it's like, I think there's much more kind of like sub 5% beer is taking its heyday at the moment. Great British styles. I think those are what we're going to see more of. You know, and you do get those little stages and phases where we all kind of go through. You kind of start home brewing, let's throw loads of hops in there. And then it's like, actually, let's learn about yeast. Let's learn about malt. Let's brew some nice beers that you can't hide behind. Oh, I'm going to dedicate half of my life to lager. And I come back to it and you think, oh, I'm going to do a barley wine. I'm going to do an old ale. You kind of go in a little circle type of thing.
Yeah. Jamil, do you follow the trends much or
not too much. I'm kind of like John, where it's like, well, you know, I'll see them when they become popular and everybody's handing me their latest version of it. But in the US, I'd say that the homebrewers are still going down the hoppy road, and they are the thing you're going to see more of is utilizing all the latest, you know, technological hop products. That's really, you know, popular and gaining steam, and I think it's going to become more mainstream as it goes. Right now, I mean, last year it was becoming kind of specialized. It was the most advanced homebrewers who were getting hold of this stuff and doing the weird things with it. And I think a lot of commercial breweries were not utilizing those products to the best advantage. And I think the homebrewers are kind of figuring it out and sharing that information. And I think you'll see a lot of that, and you're going to see these insane, you know, hop bombs or weird hop bombs. And then I think, you know, but always people will go back and brew those classics. But, you know, over the years, people have predicted, oh, this is the year that everybody's going to brew session beers. Session beers are going to be the thing. Everyone's going to want to drink a 2 or 3% beer. And I kept saying, no, in the US, that's not going to happen. You know, you want to do it because you brew the beer and you drink beer all day and you need something you can drink. You know, you're tired of drinking 6-7% beers, but the consumer, they're all still 6-7% beers. So that's never coming to pass. So any of these predictions, I don't know, take them with a grain of salt.
Interesting. Okay, you don't think we're going to see Brute IPA make another comeback then, no?
No, I think that pretty much sucked the life.
Was that like 3 weeks that lasted?
Oh, dear. Okay, great. So Gareth,
it lasted long enough for us to do a comparison brew, didn't it?
We did do a comparison brew, yeah, absolutely. And most of the beers we didn't find dry at all, which was quite bizarre. But anyway, we'll move on from Brute IPA, I think. Gareth, do you want to ask your next question? Just on mute at the moment, mate. Sorry. There you go.
Try that again. Right. This one is about water. So I'm asking about brewing with RO. So are there any disadvantages when brewing with all RO water once the usual additions are added? Or should we be brewing with some RO water as also has some tap water added? So like using dilution to get to your salts rather than pure RO and adding in?
I don't think there's any. The key word is the usual additions. So, you know, RO versus tap, I don't think there's anything special about tap water that if you're starting with RO and in adding calcium salts, magnesium salts, and so on, that you're not equivalently doing. I don't think we're missing any of the dissolved organics, pesticides and so on in tap water that we're
Copper
we're missing with
ions, things
RO.
like that.
Yeah,
they're trace ions, but
yeah,
not that important.
yeah. And a lot of the and a lot of the mineral character from the beer comes from the malt. Magnesium's a good case in point, where often when brewing with RO, you're just adding calcium salts. You don't add magnesium sulfate or magnesium chloride, because a lot of magnesium comes from the malt. But there is a case where when you're brewing, West Coast IPAs with RO and just adding calcium salts, you can block magnesium from the yeast because of the high calcium content. And the fermentations can suffer a bit due to that. So adding magnesium, I think, is important if you're doing all RO brewing. It depends on what your tap water is as well. I mean, how, but I think, sorry, I didn't say that well. You want to make sure that you get, the full mineral profile into the water that the yeast need. Bicarbonate, I find, when people brew with RO water, very often, if it's like RO with no mineral additions, the flavor of the beer, the mouthfeel of the beer, I should say, comes off as kind of watery. It just seems to lack depth of flavor. But if you add bicarbonate and then acidify to hit your mash pitch, well, you're taking all that carbon dioxide out anyway. So it's kind of a, loss there.
Yeah, one of the things for me on RO water is that, in a way, it's wasteful. You're wasting a lot of water and a lot of energy stripping out the minerals and then adding them back. And so for me, I've always, gone with, I went through a little RO phase there for a while, but I'll just work with the tap water I've got, and usually, some heat treatment will drop out a lot of the calcium, and the water's just fine to go. A little treatment with some gypsum, or the chloride. We have a question coming up, I guess, about the chloride sulfite ratio and pH. I pH adjust, and then chloride sulfite ratio, and I think you're good to go. But that's kind of my only issue with RO, is I don't think it's that necessary. I think people focus on it too much, versus you should focus more on fermentation, things like that.
Yeah, I agree with that entirely. I think our water in Berkshire, our bicarbonate is 343, which is insanely hard. But I don't think anyone in the UK needs RO water. The water is good enough quality to not worry about it. Treat it correctly, hit your pHs, and the rest is fine. RO strips way too much out, and you need to add it back in again. And most people get that kind of thing wrong and add the wrong things back in. Get your basics right, and the rest is pretty much going to be okay.
Yeah, I think RO is good when you have very high alkalinity like that, because you can only add so much acid to your brewing liquor before you start tasting the acid.
Yeah.
So yeah, RO and 300 ppm plus for bicarbonate. Yeah, it's a useful tool. Knock that down, and then you can backfill with your calcium salts.
Well, in a lot of commercial breweries, you store your hot liquor in a tank, and you drop out a lot of the bicarbonate overnight. So
yeah, that kind of, we
less of an issue.
Rest above 90 overnight, and a lot of stuff drops out.
Yeah,
and everything else.
You end up having to chip it off the tank.
Yep. Yeah.
Pretty damn expensive, I imagine, as well, an RO system for a commercial brewery in terms of volume.
They're quite wasteful as well. Like it wastes a lot of water. A lot of byproduct goes down the drain. Plus they're quite slow unless you mess it up. So yeah, it's commercially they're. I don't know. In the UK, there aren't too many breweries that are doing it, but yeah, even Siren, they got like a triple carbon block filter.
Yeah,
they drop it very soft, but it's not RO, but it's less wasteful than RO.
Yeah, yeah.
Are you testing the water much more? If on a commercial scale, you must know your water, report much better, or do you get a water test done, and therefore you know where you're starting from? Because I personally use RO, and it's more to do with the fact I don't actually know what the water is here.
Yeah,
and it changes, and therefore it gives me a baseline where I know where I'm starting.
Yeah, I think if your water's variable, then it gives you a baseline exactly. So our water is rock hard, really hard. As I mentioned, 343 bicarbonate, but it's consistent, like relentlessly consistent. We measured it, measure it every month. Very rarely changes. So at least we know what we're working with. If you don't know what you're working with, then that's a good baseline, I guess.
Yeah, at Heretic, when we start up, I just bugged the hell out of my lab guys because I was like, all right, we're testing water every day. I'm going to test water every day for like a year just to see where we're going, what's happening. And then we shifted to like once a week. And I still liked once a week, but I think they talked me into, hey, can we do this every 2 weeks or can we do this every 3 weeks? And it was, pretty consistent. It changes with the seasons a little bit when there's more rainwater available, more rivers, melted snow water. We're getting the water source from the rivers and from wells and from some reservoirs. So the water company tries to blend those to remain consistent all the time. They actually put effort into that. So if you're on a single source or two source system, it can often be more variable with the seasons. But again, it should be seasonal. Shouldn't be changing week to week. Some simple home tests, you can test your water as well.
Yeah.
It depends on which is easier for you, I guess.
Okay, cool. Cheers for that. Okay, so we're going to go back to Ben for the next question, for another question from Lloyd.
Yeah, so we touched on this earlier when we were talking about mash length, but this is sort of around the boil. Just wondered what you guys' thoughts were on the half-hour boil. I know a few people are doing it. I know Marshall does a bit of the short and shoddy method with half-hour boils. So just wondering, is there any potential problems that occur as a result of that short half-hour boil, or are there any particular styles where you would strongly suggest sort of not shortening the boil, or conversely any styles where it does work well? Just interested in you guys' thoughts on that.
John, do you want to kick off?
Okay. With smaller batch sizes, a half-hour boil, like, if you're doing a 1 gallon or 3 gallon batch, and like I said, I just did the whole book on 3 gallon batches. A half-hour boil is sufficient because you're getting, that higher evaporation rate, relative to the size of the batch. And you're getting your full DMS removal, in a shorter amount of time, versus say a 10 barrel batch or a 30 barrel batch. So that's one reason to go to a shorter boil. But yeah, I mean, you really have to take a look at the style you're brewing, the grain bill you're brewing, DMS potential, how much melanoidin development do you want, the vigor of that boil. I mean, there's so much chemistry happening during the boil. You need to be aware of where you're cutting corners so you can fill in elsewhere to complete that beer.
Okay, thoughts on that, Jamil?
Yeah, I'm with John on that. I think it's going to be dependent on size of the batch versus its style and ingredients. The more pale your ingredients, the longer you should boil generally. Drive off the SMM and avoid DMS. Again, come back to the microwaving a pork butt or smoking a pork butt. I think it kind of comes down to that. I don't know. I guess, maybe people are talking about these shorter mash times and shorter boils because they want to, be able to brew more beer, and they just have a little bit of time. People busy with families and work and stuff like that. They're not all men of leisure like myself. So that could be an issue. But I'd encourage folks to also, if that's their goal, look into malt extracts, because there's some excellent malt extracts available too. That can very much shorten your brew day. So,
okay. Andy, you ever had a play about with shorter boil lengths?
No, I was going to refer to Reiki's comment about like throw a brisket on the smoker and crack open a beer. I think, I mean, it's your hobby. Like, enjoy the day. You can get away with a shorter mash, like let it boil for 60 minutes. Don't think about it. Boil it for 60 minutes. You'll drive off any problems you've got. I think relax and enjoy the day is my view.
Certain things like old ale or something like that, you could go even longer. Barley wines, things like that, where you want that development of flavor, like John was mentioning.
Like the caramel, or you want a stronger gravity, then boil for longer. But
Couple hours.
Personally, I would never boil for less than 60 minutes.
Yeah.
I guess it's like,
go on,
everyone's kind of mentioned it, the brisket in the microwave, but it's like, what you're going to use? You're going to use Bisto, you're going to use stock gel, or you're going to actually boil some stuff up and really get those beautiful flavors. You cut corners, you miss out an opportunity to gain flavor.
Yeah, cool. Okie doke.
We're all too passionate about this for shortcuts, aren't we?
Yeah.
Well, I think if you're focusing on some other part of the process, you don't focus more on fermentation. It's like, all right, let me just make some batches with extract. I can get those done real quick, and then I can, spend more time on, this or dry hopping or whatever it would be. If it means you're making more beer, doing more batches, then that's probably a good thing.
Yeah. Even when you're spending all that money on those ingredients, why are you going to rush it? Do
True.
what is going to gain you the most flavor.
Well, you may not have the time. I run into people all the time where it's like, I got 3 kids and I work 2 jobs and I don't really have much time for brewing. Is it okay to use extract? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, extract's great. Extract's great, or fresh work kit. Throw some yeast in, off you go. Done.
Enjoy the brewing. Whatever it is.
Yeah. Okay. We got time for just for one more, guys. And then we're running a little bit over. We got time for just one more.
Yeah. Sure. I got time.
Okay. So I'm kind of asking on behalf of quite a few guys within the club itself. There's a good mix of people here who, some that use RO water and make all the adjustments. Some of the guys are just throwing a Camden tablet in. They're brewing liquor. And then some other guys who sort of use tap water as it comes, and don't make any adjustments. So, but we do get asked quite a lot, sort of, where do I start with water? And I guess it's a question around that. Is that if you've never adjusted water before, but you're interested in it, what areas would you focus on primarily, you think, in water adjustment?
Can I start this before the guys who know more than I do start talking? I've admitted plenty of times before I'm a bit of a lazy brewer. I don't have a lot of time. Get my head around the water science has always been a difficult part for me. So for me, when I started, it was like Cadmium tablet, and that's the first thing you do.
Yeah.
Then it was kind of like understanding your pH, diluting that water down with some bottled water to kind of, I'm in a really nasty hard water area. So diluting it down with some bottled water from Tesco's, massive win. You know, you stop losing those hop flavors. The hop flavors don't die out after like 2 weeks. And then, you know, the next thing was, I'm going to get my water tested by Murphy so I can understand what's in there. And now they're going to tell me what I need to add in for certain beer styles. Next step on from that, RO, and then kind of using software to calculate what needs to go in there. I still don't know what the different things do, but my beer tastes great. That's all I need to do.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you know, pH first.
pH first. Yeah.
Get your pH adjusted, and second would be, you know, the chloride to sulfate ratio. And then, you know, that's pretty much 95% or 99% of what anybody needs to do in water adjustment for.
But even I guess Jamil, even the chloride to sulfate ratio takes a little bit of learning as well, because it's different on each style. You know, you kind of you need to start working out what you want to sort of achieve by adjusting that ratio, I guess.
I think pH gets you 90% of the way on water.
Yeah.
It's just adjust your pH. And then if you want to take it further, then you can go into these other things. But and 90% of what's important is just adjusting your pH.
And that goes back to the first thing we talked about, was the whole fermentation.
Yeah.
You know, that's what makes the yeast happy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I would agree with Jamil on pH. Like, pH is the number one thing. If you're running like 5.3 to 5.6 on your mash, the rest of it would generally be okay. I liken it to seasoning in cooking. The rest of it, you kind of fine tuning at that point. I guess we'll let John Palmer have the last word on water.
I think we should.
I think like get the basic, understand the basics. The basics is the mash pH, because that's the interaction between your malts, your water, and everything in between. Get that right, and you're brewing good beer.
Yeah.
Over to you, John, on the final word on this one.
No, that's it. It's so hard to pick out which piece to work on first. In general, I would say that chlorine removal with the Camden tablet or what is it, vitamin C, you know, works. Ascorbic acid is, you know, easy thing to do. Get the chlorine out of there, and you know that you save yourself some problems. Then pH, but for a new home brewer, getting them to understand the playing field of pH can be troublesome. And so I would point to alkalinity adjustment, you know, where, you know, you look, if you can understand that your local tap water has 200, 300 ppm of bicarbonate, you know, you learn how to add acid to knock that down. And, you know, you can do that fairly easily with software. You know, a lot of brewing software out these days. You know, and if you get that alkalinity knocked out, that's most of your pH problems. You know, you won't have to be measuring pH if you know that you've neutralized your alkalinity beforehand.
I think we're saying the same thing.
It's kind of two ways to attack the same problem.
Add acid, knock your pH down.
And
or
then
buffer to keep your pH up. In a dark beer.
pH, I really do agree. pH is of very high importance, and understanding mash pH and, you know, getting that dialed in is kind of your first priority as a good brewer. But for the beginning brewer, until they have a chance to, you know, understand all the chemistry that goes with it, you can kind of hit the symptoms, as it were, as opposed to the disease.
Okay. Awesome, guys. Any final comments for our guys? Is everybody on the? I guess not everybody on the call is adjusting pH. Maybe that's a little club night we could have on our own. Is looking at how we adjust and measure pH as a club. I think it'd be quite an interesting experiment for us to do. Not experiment, but more of a kind of knowledge session, if you like.
Well, the question I was going to
Yeah,
raise
so-
is obviously there's different acids you can use to adjust pH. So I use phosphoric acid. So I used to use lactic acid, but I think lactic acid, because I have very hard water, so I used to use quite a lot of lactic acid, but that came through in the sort of taste profile later on. So I use phosphoric now, which I find is quite flavor neutral. So maybe the acid types is also a factor.
Yeah.
Right.
And I suggest often that people use a blend of lactic and phosphoric for those cases. Phosphoric has the potential to drop your calcium out of solution. So if you're trying to do calcium salt additions, those can, and then you do acid adjustment, then all those can fall out of solution as calcium phosphate. So you kind of got to test after the fact almost to figure that out if that's happening.
Okay.
So
More of a sensory thing, like
50,
taste the
50.
finished beer and figure out if you can taste it. Adjust afterwards.
Mm-hmm. Dave, you were saying?
Sorry, I was just asking about the blend, John. You were saying blend the two different acids. Is that like a 50-50 mix of lactic and phosphoric? Or?
Yeah, just use both of them. Use your brewing software to figure out how much you need to add. But if you address it from the aspect, I've got 250 ppm of a total alkalinity or 250 ppm of bicarbonate that I'm trying to neutralize with my acid, the software will tell you how many milliliters of acid that is. And then you can either use all phosphoric, all lactic, or a blend of the two.
And if you're tasting too much lactic, then use a higher percentage of phosphoric.
Yeah.
Just sway the ratios, I guess. Change the ratios a bit to your taste.
Yeah.
Because Chris, I agree with you 100%. You can taste lactic if you use too much.
Yeah.
What kind of volume is that then, Chris, that you were tasting it? How much were you using?
It'd be like sort of 5, 6, 7 milliliters
On a 20-litre batch, or
on like a standard, sort of 23-litre batch.
Oh right, okay.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm sensitive, but I could taste it. It didn't taste great. So I switched to phosphoric acid, which made a big difference. And yeah,
we're all sensitive to different tastes. It's like just like diacetyl. Some people have a palate that's much more sensitive towards it. So that could be it.
Mm.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Well, I think.
Scale, Andy.
Sorry, go on.
I was just asking on a commercial scale, Andy. Are you which acids and are you? I mean, you talked about the 300 plus ppm of bicarbonates. Are you into a significant amount of acid to knock that down?
Yeah, not so much. We use lactic acid, but we're 300 mil into 1,000 liters of water, so it's a very small amount. We use salts to bring most of the adjustment down. So I don't worry too much about the flavor of lactic. Not a problem for us at all. So yeah, we use lactic, but we also use salts to buffer pH.
Cool. Good stuff. Well, we've gone 15 minutes, 16 minutes over, guys. So I think we'll let our guests go. If anybody wants to stay around, I think we'll probably stay around and have a beer or two after this. But I just wanted, absolutely to say a great big thank you. It's kind of, I'm not sure how much feedback you get from home brewers, but I just wanted to say it's really appreciative how much knowledge that you guys are putting into the hobby. It makes the hobby really interesting and it's fantastic that we can go out and get the answers to our questions. So it's really appreciative you doing events like this. And Jamil, when you came over to BrewCon, you know, I think everybody was sort of like focused on every word that you were saying, and Andy's done the BrewCon sessions as well, and it's a captive audience. Everybody wants to sap that knowledge, so it is really appreciated the knowledge that you guys are putting into the hobby. And thanks a lot for joining us on our 7th birthday meet. It's been great to have you here, guys.
That's been fun. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for inviting us. Hopefully I'll get a chance to stop by, visit you guys.
Yeah,
I don't know if it'll be this year. Maybe. I'm still working out all my stops and everything, but I might get a chance to swing by. Maybe we can. I'll have a couple of pints some night. I'm assuming that ideally it would be a Friday night or a Saturday night for you guys. Would be the best time for me to swing through. Yeah.
I'm not sure, Jamil. I think
if you come over, it doesn't matter what night it is.
Yeah.
Any night's good for beer.
We can sort you out some proper cask beer. Don't you worry.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure John Primer or Jamil Zainasheff can swing through whenever they like.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Brilliant. Thanks a lot, guys. I'm going to stop the recording now. So yeah, cheers. Thanks again.
Thanks.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.